The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have a new problem on their hands when they play the Detroit Lions. James Houston is back, and we're going to talk about how he's going to have an impact on this game coming up. Stay tuned, everybody.
We used to be a team no one respected. We used to be a team no one feared. That was then. This is now.
First victory of the year on the line. Goff's got it. Back, looks, throws, end zone. Yes! Caught!
You know who we are.
10, 5, end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And you know where to find us. We won't be far. We'll be on your front porch waiting for you. We are the New Era Lions. And
we are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving in. But before we dive on in, I want to say to all my loyal fans and subscribers that are coming back, thank you all for coming back to the show. Thank you all for everything that you do. It absolutely means the world to me that I have such loyal subscribers, for all your patronage and support. And to those that are tuning into my show for the very first time, I just want to say thank you for watching the content. Thank you all for everything that you do as well. It means the world to me that you guys are also in on this. I hope you all enjoy the content, but even more so, I hope to gain your subscription if I've earned and deserved it. And with that being said, I just want to say to everybody, God bless, hope you all enjoy the show, and let's dive into it. So, here's the thing, folks. I'm not going to beat around the bush with the news that we already know. It came out, probably sometime about middle of the day yesterday that James Houston had been officially activated from IR, and that to counteract that roster move, the Lions were waiving, cutting Julian Okwara, which this is a move that does not surprise me. I said it earlier in the year when we were doing the roster cuts. I think that was back when I was still on DLF, that I was like, listen, Julian Okwara is one of those guys that's going to be on the roster bubble. And for me, the fact that, we've had guys that have come back from injury, we've added a couple guys throughout the course of the year, it makes no surprise to me that Julian Okwara got cut when we got James Houston back. But c'est la vie. Point of the matter is getting James Houston back at this point in the season is a blessing. It's not a blessing in disguise. It's not a silver lining. It's a full-on blessing. Because you are getting a guy that is going to be 100% fresh. And more so, he's not only going to just be fresh. He is going to be literally chomping at the bit. He is going to be frothing at the mouth. He literally is going to be bringing all of his pent-up frustration, his pent-up tenacity. He is going to go out there, and I guarantee you this, he is going to be playing with an attitude. He is going to be playing with an absolute just fire to just get after people. And that in of itself is good to know, because we have seen the kind of damage that James Houston can do to opposing offenses. But when you truly think about the damage that James Houston can do, you have to put this all into connection and in context with what has happened currently this year. And that's where we're going to kind of take this episode. We're going to kind of take the news of James Houston coming back, but we're also going to put it in connection with what has happened this year. So, again, going to throw a lot of numbers at you guys, but again, if you stick with me, you guys will understand what I'm trying to say here. So, first and foremost, a little bit of a history lesson, but it's going to set up the whole kind of, talk about what we're about to have here. We already know that James Houston is a literal dynamite when it comes to sacking the quarterback. If you go back to the end of last year, the man literally had just that innate ability to sack the quarterback when you desperately needed a sack. Now, that was last year. Now, this year, we also have a guy that took his game even further, hometown favorite, former U of M Wolverine, and Aiden Hutchinson. Last year, Aiden Hutchinson, 9.5 sacks, led the NFL in terms of sacks for rookies, did a great job for us. But this year, he's only taken his game to the next level. So when we take a look at what these two did last year, which is definitely something to keep in mind here, especially when we take a look at what's going to most likely, in my opinion, be the impact for this upcoming game, you're really going to start to get an idea why I think that why the Bucs, in my opinion, should be shivering in their boots, shivering their timbers, so to speak, as the thumbnail would state. But let's think about this. First and foremost, I want to show you guys what these two did together, Hutch and Houston did over the final 8 weeks of the regular season in 2022. First and foremost, Hutch in his last 8 weeks of 2022 had 4 sacks, 22 pressures, 5 tackles for losses. That comes from both PFF and comes from Pro Football Reference. Again, I'm trying to, cross-examine different stat websites so that way I got the most accurate information that I can possibly get. That's Hutchinson. When you take a look at Houston over the last 8 weeks, again, going from Pro Football Reference and PFF, which is where most of these stats are coming from, Houston had 8 sacks, 17 pressures, and 7 tackles for loss. That was over the last 8 weeks of the season. When you combine those two stats together, or those two sets of stats together, you get 12 total sacks, 39 pressures, and 12 tackles for loss. That is a pretty good combination of numbers from 2 rookies in 2022. That's in only 8 weeks, too, so you're talking about only about half of the season. So, when you take a look at that, you're doing pretty good in terms of what those guys were able to accomplish in 2022. Now, that, of course, is only part of the picture. I'm trying to give you guys a bit of information to show you guys, okay, that's how prolific Hutch and Houston were when Houston was on the field for those 8 weeks. But when you start actually taking a look at the totality of the season, and you really start understanding what was going on how should I put this? In the total context of 2022, you're going to get even more of an appreciation of how those guys truly, truly were. Because again, like I said, in 2022, Hutchinson had 9.5 sacks, Houston had 8 sacks. Well, if you also include their pressures and TFLs like I just did, Hutchinson had 53 pressures for 9 tackles for loss. Houston had 17 pressures with 7 tackles for loss. What that tells me is that, number one, whenever Houston was getting close to the quarterback, more likely than not, he was going to sack him. That's almost a 50% pressure to sack ratio right there. That's doing pretty damn good. But then when I decided to combine the two stats together and then take a look at how the entire defense of the Lions did in 2022, these rookies were damn dominant. Combined together, Hutch and Houston had 17.5 sacks, 70 pressures, and 16 tackles for losses. You want to know what the percentage of that total was for the entire defense in 2022? 44.9% of the sack total of the defense, 23% of the pressure total, and 21% of the team's tackle for losses. Those two rookies were explosive. And again, you're talking about one rookie that played the whole season in Hutchinson and the other rookie who only played half of the season in Houston. But together, combined, they made up a humongous part of that defense in 2022. Now, that's 2022. What the hell bearings does that have on 2023? I guarantee you some people are asking that. The reason I brought it up is because it's like, okay, what happened to Houston? He got injured in week 2 against the Seattle Seahawks. That was a big bummer because it was like, listen, a lot of people were looking to see what Houston was going to be able to do with a full season to develop and continue to, hone and craft his skills. We were robbed of that. But on the flip side of that coin, we got to see how much better Hutchinson developed. Because again, at that point, we lost our other main outside edge rusher in Houston. So then Hutch became the sole primary, beneficiary. I wouldn't say that beneficiary would be a word that he would like, but he became the sole beneficiary of all opposing offensive linemen's attention to try and stop. But yet, despite all that extra attention, Hutchinson still increased his amount of sacks substantially. He increased his amount of pressures ridiculously, and his tackles for loss also went up from his rookie year to his second year. Because again, Hutchinson had 9.5 sacks in 2022. He increased it by 2 sacks this year in 2023. He had 53 pressures on the total year in 2022. That 53 pressures jumped all the way up to 101 in 2023. He had 9 tackles for loss in 2022. That jumped up to 14 tackles for loss. And again, that was him pretty much doing that all by himself. So when you keep all that in perspective here, just, again, play the hypothetical game with me. Imagine, if you will, had Houston not been injured, and that Houston would have had the chance to fully develop and craft his skills as an edge rusher, more so than what we saw over those last 8 weeks. Can you just imagine how ridiculously potent, how ridiculously good this pass rushing tandem would be right now? Because I'm just gonna point this out even further. Hutchinson had a great year in 2023, especially considering the fact that he's pretty much done most of what he's done all by himself. I'm not saying he's not had any help, But when you take a look at the next closest teammates in all three of those categories, sacks, pressures, tackles for loss, it's damn impressive how good Hutchinson has been. The next closest defender or defensive person that the Lions have in terms of sacks is Aleem McNeil with 5 sacks. That's a 6.5 drop in production comparison difference between the two teammates. In terms of pressures, it's also Aleem McNeil. McNeil has 34 pressures. You want to know how much of a difference that is? That's 67 less pressures than what Hutchinson has. That is ridiculous. That pretty much tells me that the majority of where our pressures have been coming from have been solely coming from Hutchinson. Hutchinson has been a virtual and literal one-man wrecking crew when it comes to getting pressures on the quarterback. Then you take a look at tackles for losses. We already know that Hutchinson has 14 on the year. The next closest are actually tied between two players, Anzalone and Branch, who have 7 apiece. That's 7 less than what Hutchinson has. So when you take a look at the statistics that I'm pointing out here from 2023, Hutchinson is a huge part of this Lions defense ability, if you will, to not only get after the quarterback, but where it has been so good, especially in the run defense and also being able to pressure the quarterback. Because again, like I pointed out in an episode not too long ago, the Lions are the number 1 pressure overall defense and the number 1 pressure rate defense. They do a really good job of applying pressure to quarterbacks. Maybe not necessarily, if you would say, getting sacks, but pressuring, no problem. Now, where does this help with Houston as a dangerous weapon, as my title demonstrates? Again, Houston in 8 weeks had 8 sacks. Now, obviously, that would mean 1 sack per game on average, but we know that's not the way it happened. But what does Houston do really well? Houston, as we saw in those 8 weeks, has the ability to get lower and bend a lot better than most edge rushers, which means that he is extremely explosive and fast off the edge, where tackles have a hard time of getting that back foot to get back quick enough to stop Houston. So now you've got a bull rusher on one side in Aiden Hutchinson, who has spent the entire year crafting himself to become an even better edge rusher. Now you've got a guy in James Houston who uses his speed and flexibility off the edge, and he's coming into this game with fresh legs. Literal fresh legs. Just imagine what kind of speed and ferocity he's going to have on the opposite edge of that offensive line for the Buccaneers. Just think about that. That right there for me shows that this is going to be a very interesting game because I want to see how these two work together. Now, the next thing I want to bring in about this is that when you have these two edge rushers, it means that now, hopefully, again, heavy emphasis on the word hopefully, you're going to have the ability for Aaron Glenn to bring pressure from multiple areas. This is pretty self-explanatory because it's like, listen, now you can bring linebackers up the middle. Now you can bring pinching movements on the outside from both edge rushers. You can potentially do stunt moves where the two edge rushers come inside and then the inside men go out. Now you have the ability to be much more flexible, much more dynamic with your ability to bring pressure from multiple avenues to really confuse and stress an offensive line's ability to protect the quarterback and also to, get after in the rushing lanes as well. So for me, having that extra weapon in Houston is really going to help in my opinion, even if the Lions do decide to only play him for a select amount of downs since it is his first game back. But as we already know, James Houston, when he was only played for a select amount of downs, did a lot of damage in those select amount of downs. So for me, I don't really have a problem with that, working him back in. When he gets his opportunities, he makes the damn most of them. The next point I want to talk about here is this. When you're talking about Hutchinson Hutchinson, great year. And I know I've said again quite a bit, but the truth is in the pudding. Hutchinson over the totality of the year has been great, but if you again take a look at the last 6 weeks, he had 6 sacks over the last 6 weeks. There were 18 sacks in those 6 weeks. That means that Hutchinson accounted for 33% of the team's sack total in 6 weeks. Hutchinson had 38 pressures in those 6 weeks. Again, very consistent getting after the quarterback. Again, 6 times 6 is 36. That means on average, almost every single week, Hutchinson was pressuring the quarterback about 6 or 7 times about. Then you take a look at the tackles for loss. Hutchinson had 9 tackles for loss in those last 6 weeks before we got to the postseason. there were 33 team tackles for loss. That means that Hutchinson accounted for 27% of the team's tackle for loss in those last 6 weeks. So again, you are seeing a guy that is accounting for almost a third of the defense's ability to affect the quarterback and to make tackles in the backfield, which puts the offense behind the sticks. When you combine that freaking, just pent-up frustration and controlled chaos that Hutchinson provides and gives to a defensive edge, and now you've got this fresh body who's also got a lot of pent-up frustration because he's missed the majority of the year. And by the way, this is Houston's very first playoff game. He's going to be coming at this with also a different kind of focus because it's the playoffs. You give 110%. You've got both those guys coming off the edge. Oh yeah, I'm feeling really good about what we can potentially dial up against this Buccaneers offensive line. So there's that as well. Now finally, the one thing I wanted to talk about here is, we can talk all day long about how good Hutchinson has been this year. We can talk about how, Houston's going to have, in my opinion, a really good game because of his ability to dip and bend and be flexible and do all of these things that is really, really unique to him as a pass rusher. But the one thing that I think really is going to kind of, solidify the argument is when we take a look at the Buccaneers offensive line. And we need to take a look at how well they've done this year. Because I talked about it again in a previous episode. The Buccaneers have allowed Baker Mayfield to be the 6th highest sacked quarterback in the NFL. I believe Baker has been sacked 40 times this year. That's not very good. Because the Lions have got 41 sacks on the year. That means that the Lions have pretty much almost the same amount of sacks as a defense as Baker Mayfield has been sacked on the total of the year. Not very good for Baker Mayfield. But then when you go even further into the statistics, take a look at this. Baker Mayfield is also the 7th highest quarterback that is responsible for his own sacks. What does that mean? That means that the line actually did a decent job of blocking him on certain plays. He just held on to the ball way too damn long, resulting in him getting a sack for his own lack of ability to let go of the ball. But also at the same time, his offensive line is 5th highest in the league in responsibility for their quarterback getting sacked. What does that mean? Because I'm saying that both the offensive line is highly responsible for Baker getting sacked, and also Baker is highly responsible for his own sacks. That pretty much tells me this. Baker holds onto the ball way too damn long, and the offensive line is not that good. Pretty much translation means this. There will be a lot of opportunities for both Hutchinson and Houston to get sacks in this game. Again, go back to the game we just played against the frickin' Rams. Hutchinson had 2 sacks in that game. And I can guarantee you this, the Buccaneers offensive line is not as good as the Rams. Because let's think about this here. Which members of that Buccaneers offensive line have given up the most sacks? The most belong to these 3 individuals. The right guard, who's given up 7 sacks, who I believe his name is Cody Mauch. Their 2 tackles, so both right tackle and left tackle, have both given up 5 sacks apiece, which is Tristan Wirfs, and I hope I pronounced this name correct, Luke Godeek. Both of them have given up 5 sacks apiece. So again, the right side of the offensive line is particularly weak. Well, wait a minute here. What side does Aiden Hutchinson particularly line up on the most? He usually lines up on the right side of the offensive line or the left side of the defense. So where there's the weakest side of the offensive line is where Hutchinson's going to line up the most often. And just to end this little statistical analysis session, I took a look at ESPN Analytics. The Buccaneers have the 22nd worst pass block win rate in the NFL at 54%, and they have the dead last, the worst rush block win rate in the NFL at 67%. Translation? The Buccaneers' offensive line is crap. They can't pass block worth a damn. Their quarterback likes to hold on to the ball way too damn much. And they can't run block worth a damn as well. It might as well just be Swiss cheese back there. Which, when you think about it, when the Buccaneers have the worst offensive rushing attack in both yards and in average, and the second to worst one in rushing first downs, it's no damn surprise. And when your quarterback is the 6th highest sacked quarterback in the NFL, again, no damn surprise. So for me, it's like, listen, you pair Hutch with Houston in his first game back, it's a playoff game, he's got fresh legs, I'm telling you this right now. This is a matchup that is going to be really, really damn fun to watch. And we already know that Ford Field is going to be electric. It's going to be loud. And Baker Mayfield does not do very good in loud, high-pressure stadiums. This is going to be a horrible game for him as far as all the circumstances and situations that he's got coming towards him. It's going to be fun to watch, in my opinion. Or at least it should be, provided, of course, if Aaron Glenn uses Houston and Hutchinson in the right manner. But we shall see. But having said that, I think I've done a pretty good job of presenting the evidence, presenting the data, presenting all the statistics. So I just want to say now, thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. I also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past, you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you've not had a chance to do so, again, please subscribe. It helps me out, and I'm ever so thankful for every subscription that I can get my hands on. But also, after you subscribe, please make sure you turn on that bell notification icon as well, so that way you never miss any more content that I push out. Again, subscription numbers are always going up, but we want to make sure you turn on that notification icon, so that way as soon as I push something out, you guys can get right on in, we can have great discussions, and we can continue to talk football. Also, to help in that endeavor, share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you please. That way we can continue to help the channel grow and spread. The more we share it, the better that happens and the better the channel does. And with that having been said, to everybody, I just want to say, I hope you all enjoyed the content. Thank you all for tuning into the show. It means the world to me. And if you just joined the family as a subscriber, welcome to MCM. I really am so thankful for you guys to join. And if I still haven't had your subscription yet, hopefully I'll get another chance to do so in the future. But until that time, I just want to say to everybody, God bless. Hope you all enjoyed the show. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.